I would like to explore with you this afternoon the deepest truth of human existence. When I say that may sound a little bit abstract. Interesting, but abstract. Human existence. And it may sound a little bit philosophical. But this is not a lecture on philosophy, nor is it a lecture at all. The best way to look upon it is as a meditation. Although somebody is speaking, look upon it as a meditation. So when I say the deepest truth of human existence, it sounds a little bit removed from your everyday concerns. So let's put it in another way. We are here to explore the deepest truth of who you are. Because you are human existence. We are here to explore the deepest truth within yourself. Knowing yourself at the deepest level. A level so deep that knowing yourself and knowing God become one and the same. There are two levels to this talk, if it can be called that. One is the words, and one is the gaps between the words, a certain stillness. I'll just point this out because it is helpful as you listen to be aware not only of the words but of an underlying field of stillness out of which the words come. Nothing personal. There's a field of stillness that is both within and without. Gaps between the words. A silent space. In between and underlying the words. And simply to be aware also of that dimension. Then listening to these words is more than absorbing information, because there isn't that much information here. It's not an information-based talk. Then it becomes a meditation to just sit here and listen. And the deeper teaching, if it can even be called teaching, is not in and through the words. The deeper teaching lies in the dimension of stillness. Because the moment you acknowledge that underlying dimension, you have accessed a realm within yourself that is deeper than the stream of mind with which most people are identified as themselves. Simply as we sit here, to acknowledge, to notice, to listen to an underlying stillness. That which acknowledges that in you, that which is able to listen to that dimension, listen not to something, listen to nothing, to nothing. Just the act of listening. That in you which is able to acknowledge that dimension, to be attentive to that dimension, is a realm of stillness underneath the stream of mental noise. In other words, the moment you pay attention to that dimension of silence, there is a stillness in you. Because through thought, you cannot pay attention to silence because thought is noise. So already, although through words we are going to progressively explore the deepest truth of human existence, even as you sit here and follow the words that progressively explore the deepest truth of human existence, that deepest truth of human existence is already emerging in you as you sit here and listen, even now, simply by paying attention to silence through the inner stillness. That is the only way you can notice. The stillness in you notices that. And you have gone beyond the continuous stream of mental noise that for most people is who they think they are. So the answer to the initial question that I asked, I said, let's explore the deepest truth of human existence, the deepest truth of who you are. The answer of that is never really in the future. Not even within the framework of this talk is the answer of who you are beyond the conditioned mind. Never is that answer in the future. It's always now. So our question, what does that mean? The deepest truth of who you are, knowing yourself. Doesn't everybody know themselves already? And most people would say, yes, I know my name and all those things that are associated with my name. Things that cling to that initial form identity that my parents have given me when they taught me what my name is, such and such, whatever it may be. First, what's your name? The little child is asked, and is very proud to be able to say his or her name, and the parents say, very good. That's the way human existence goes. And nobody realizes that already through the initial first label mental label. First, identification with a thought, a sequence of sounds. The first limitation, illusory limitation on who you truly are beyond mental concepts. The first limitation has already arisen. You have already entered a prison of conceptualization. It is the beginning of it. But we need to go that way. Humans have to move through that. It would be futile to tell a child, you have no name. Don't identify yourself with a name. That the child has to go through the stage. Every human being has to go through the stage where they begin to accumulate experiences, knowledge, labels, words, concepts, all kinds of things, cultural conditioning, personal conditioning through their environment, and these things then cling around the name, and after a few years, gradually a sense of self develops, a me. Even in a small child it begins to develop when the child says, my toy is bigger than yours. Feels good to the child to strengthen its sense of self through feeling, I have more than you, I know more than you, or my father is stronger than yours. You can add a bit more to that sense of self, and again that is a normal process. And so gradually the accumulations continue. And you become an adult, and then you have a certain sense of self based on the conditioning of your mind. That is the mind that never stops. That is the mind that is a continuous stream of thought processes. And the thought processes are strongly connected with the conditioning of your mind. So the stream of thinking, and this doesn't depend on culture, it doesn't depend whether you live in India or in the West. It is the same in every human being. The stream of thinking goes on incessantly. And a lot of that is to do with me and my concerns and my problems and what's going to happen to me. There's a story of me, which is my past. Things have happened to me, things that I have accumulated. The content of my mind is a kind of story that people like to dwell on, talk to themselves about their story, have a monologue or a dialogue in the head. And so a sense of self develops that is mind-based. And that's again happens to everybody. A sense of self develops that is content-based, content and form-based, a psychological form of me. And for most people that is who they are. So if you ask them, who are you, they would tell you a little story. It could be, they could keep it brief, they could give you a brief summary of me, or they can make it very long. They can go on for hours because my story is so interesting and dramatic. Have you got enough time to listen to it? Let me tell you what my story is and what I have suffered, what I have seen, what I have, my triumphs and my victories and my defeats, what people have done to me and all the bad things that I have done. I'll tell you about all of this. And so this is why psychoanalysts make a good living. Because there you pay them to listen to you and to the story. And if you want to be thorough in psychoanalysis, you have to go 3 times a week for a few years. And so you tell your story, and as you tell the story of me, more and more layers of complexity become revealed about me. And it's so interesting. And so, after you have completed your course of psychoanalysis, if ever, then the psychoanalyst might tell you, we have come to the end. This, by the way, that's very rare. He will tell you, we have come to the end of our analysis. We have analyzed everything about you, and I will give you the file. It's big. Here it is. You can take it home. This is you. And if then somebody asks you, do you know yourself? You say, oh yes, it's all here. The content of my mind has been analyzed, and here it is in this file, or it might be a computer disk these days. And so I can tell you all about it. And of course, when they say, I know myself, what they really mean is, I know a lot about myself. I know many things about myself, a lot of information, many facts. And they forget who the I is that knows, because all that knowledge is knowledge about. It's form knowledge. You know a lot about your psychological form identity. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Each person moves within a form identity, has a form identity, which is not to be rejected, but to be honored. Part of your form identity is the function that you have in this world, the social function, your profession, whatever you do, your activity, your relationship to other people as a mother, as a father, as the boss. Many other things come into it, your cultural background, your nationality, the nation that you feel you are part of, is part of that conditioning. It is not to be discarded, but also to be honored. You honor the forms that are the content of your mind. You identify with as me. The only thing is, if you only know yourself as those forms, because every form identity exists or consists of various roles that people play within that form. And that usually is the limit of people's self-knowledge. Plus, if they've done psychoanalysis, they know about their childhood and all those things that happened then. So, is there more to who you are than the form identity, which has two levels? We've been speaking about the psychological form of me, and of course then there is the physical form of the body. So people identify with the two. There's my physical body, me, and there's a psychological story, and that is the story of me, and that includes all the conditioning, or the reactive patterns, all those things are in there. The content of the mind is the psychological form of me. So we have the two levels of identification. And sometimes the body can be a very strong identification in certain people. It becomes part also of the psychological form identity. If, for example, your body is very beautiful or your body is very strong, that enhances your psychological form identity. It gives you a feeling that you are stronger, more beautiful than others, and the sense of self becomes enhanced through that. And that can last for quite a while, and it works quite well until you reach the body begins to grow old. And then the beauty fades. And if that was the main part of your form identity, great suffering starts. When the beauty fades, that you thought that was me. So the form identity, both physical and even more strongly psychological form, has certain characteristics. And one of the characteristics of form identity is that it never feels complete. It never feels, except for brief moments which turn out to be delusory, never feels really at ease or at peace. It never feels that you are really and fully yourself, yet. Yet is added by the mind, because that's the little escape which says, okay, yes, there is this recurring, almost permanently underlying sense of lack, of insufficiency, and of incompleteness. And many people who are not conscious enough don't feel it directly. It becomes translated into continuous wanting and needing this or that to fill that hole that they feel, to fill that sense of lack and insufficiency with something, to make myself complete in this form identity. And so there is an enormous need in human beings to add more to me, to make me complete. And that is the search, that is the enormous momentum behind human wanting and needing. The Buddha speaks of desire, and again, that's a little bit abstract. At his time, it was a powerful word, perhaps. But desire really is wanting, needing. And then you look for things to add to the accumulated content of mental identifications to complete my sense of self. So you look to, and it's strange, it's a little bit like it'll grasp at anything to add to me, whatever it can. And a very common one, of course, is material possessions that I identify with. I have more than you. This enhances my sense of self. I identify with my house. I identify with my car. In a very subtle way, I feel it's an extension of me. The car has become a mind object. And that mind object is used to strengthen, to enhance a deficient sense of self. And for a little while, it works. You feel bigger as you step into your BMW. You have expanded. Your sense of self has grown. And you are more powerful than all those little, puny little cars around you. And for a little while, that works. You feel almost you have arrived. And then, before long, it wears off. And then you sit in that car and it's not that fulfilling anymore. It's just a car. It gets you from A to B. Okay, that wasn't quite it. And then you look to the next thing. And the next thing could be a relationship to complete me. Because the last one didn't work, it didn't complete me. Something went wrong. So you go out and look for it there. The ideal one I'm going to meet one day, I'm looking for the ideal partner that is going to complete my sense of self. And then it happens at times that you find him or her. That means it's called falling in love. And it says, okay, I found you, you are going to complete me, you are going to make me happy, which you sometimes read in the Lonely Hearts columns looking for someone to make me happy. What they mean is to make my sense of self complete, to fill that lack that I feel. And so you might get married, and for a while the illusion is there, just as it was there with the BMW, that now I have arrived. This is when you fall in love. You have this euphoria of completeness. Finally, the story of me has completed itself. I have arrived. I made it. And then comes the honeymoon. And then comes ordinary existence. And all the things that arise in ordinary existence. And sooner or later, this ideal partner fails to live up to what she had promised when he signed the wedding document, that is to complete you, to make you happy. It's not working anymore. That feeling disappears. And then it becomes, that I made a dreadful mistake. It wasn't the right one. He wasn't right. Or you begin to look elsewhere. But in the meantime, you've been looking every day for hundreds of little things to add to me, to enhance your sense of self. All kinds of little things to whatever. One could make a list of hundreds of things how that egoic self and mind-made entity looks for little things to add to me. Experiences. Can add anything, drugs maybe, to have an experience with that, maybe that. Food even. Food, I can add that. It's a psychological need. The body has a limited need for food, but the psychological me has a great need for food, because even through that it can make itself feel a little bit more complete. A box of chocolate works for an hour or two. And you can see the impulse behind it when people reach into the bag of chips or the chocolate, and there's more. It's not the body really that wants, it's the mind-made self that seeks some completion through that. And when the bag of chips is empty, it looks for the next thing. So in many little and big things, there is this enormous need to add to me, and everywhere, to make myself complete, because that completeness never lasts. And so people believe that their sense of not having arrived, of not quite having made it yet, of not being truly and fully yourself, people believe that this is their personal problem. They believe that others exist who have made it, because you see the movies and you see the magazines that show you these glamorous, famous people who apparently, surely they must have made it. They look so happy in their glamorous surroundings. And the culture tells you that that is the way to go. You can make it, just try harder to have more possessions or more status. That's a big, intangible but enormous thing to add to oneself. Other people's view of me is an enormous piece, can be bigger than the greatest mansion. That need for others to give me their approval, their high opinion. And so there's the need for status in society, for others to tell me that I am great and good enough. And these are enormous chunks of identifications that you can add to the deficient sense of self. And for a little while, that also works. And then, if you've met any of the famous people that you see in the magazines and films, whatever sports, movies, famous this, famous that, people who are told by the surrounding culture and the world that they are special, that they have made it, and they are great role symbols in society. And if you meet them, you will see that underneath the glamorous facade, there is the same sense of deficiency. It didn't complete them. The whole world telling them that they are great, and deep down they feel this is a big lie. Also, there are famous people who have actually, through that, have seen through the delusion of that, the meaninglessness of this world, which to a large extent is mad, because it's the human egoic mind telling you that you are important. And some people striving a lifetime to add that to their sense of self, to the world, please tell me that I matter. My sense of self depends on it. Please tell me that I am important. And then, of course, only a few are told that. The others are left in limbo and are unhappy there. And those that are told that they are important, they are unhappy there. Not complete. And it happens occasionally that a few of those people who made it rich and famous, they begin to go deeper because they have everything and they can't possibly think of any more to add to me. Because what can you add when you have everything, could buy anything, go anywhere, and everybody thinks you are God? And still feel. And so some of those actually see through the delusion and then penetrate to deeper levels of their being. But for many of us, there is always the hope that through this or that addition to me, added content for the mind, the mental identifications, that through that I can complete myself and my life is going to work, and finally feel that I have arrived. I'm home. I'm fully myself. And what people don't realize is it is not their personal problem, the fact that they feel that they haven't arrived, that they haven't made it. It is built into the very structure of the mind-made sense of self. That deficiency and sense of lack is inseparable from those mind structures, from that identity. So it is nothing to do with what you could possibly add. Nothing that you add could fulfill you, is the truth. And that is, for spiritual seekers, this is a very subtle point. Because that mindset, which is collectively conditioned, nobody's personal problem, that has an enormous need for more of whatever it may be, more. That mindset is quite deep-seated. It implies, of course, that you have an enormous need for future, because it's only through future, and you're looking into future, where you can get the future, the mind-made self tells you, will enable you to get that. And this is why very few human beings are actually where they are, rooted in the presence of now. They are reaching out in that drive for more. They are reaching continuously. They are being pulled out of now, which is all there ever is, which is life itself. Nothing else ever exists except now. But they are pulled out of this into a mental projection, a psychological future where they're going to complete themselves because they will reach that more there. That's the momentum. And that's how most people live. In that continuous, almost desperate search for being ultimately yourself. Finding yourself through more. Through future. Finding myself through future. Everybody's doing it through looking where you can add more. Where is the more? I need more. And then you become frustrated with the more gross levels of more, and then you move up into the subtle levels of more, where you seek to add, perhaps, spiritual experiences. And a spiritual seeker needs to be very careful and look whether within him or herself the need for more still operates, and then the spiritual search becomes a need to add more to me as spiritual knowledge. Spiritual knowledge is valuable and beautiful as a pointer, but it can become mental content that I identify with as me. Spiritual scriptures and spiritual knowledge is wonderful. This country is the cradle for that. It has got the most beautiful and profound maps or signposts towards who you truly are, to point you to that. And if used rightly, it works beautifully and powerfully. But if used by a mind that is seeking more to add to me, then the very scripture could become a hindrance, because you accumulate maps and signposts. They are beautiful and you carry great knowledge. And in a very subtle way, a spiritual ego could also come in. It's very more subtle than the BMW ego. It's the ego coming back through the back door, and there's a very subtle sense of, I am now more than all those poor little worms who have not yet seen the light. I have studied those things. I have studied with masters. I've been to monasteries, or in the West it's workshops. I have done all those, and there's so much. There's a very subtle sense of more, but never enough, because you feel, well, I haven't quite arrived yet, but I'm already more than all those mere more. It's a very subtle thing, and you have to be very vigilant to see it in yourself, that still that deep-seated collective mental conditioning, the need for more, flows even into the spiritual search, the spiritual seeking to become fully myself. And again, there's a great psychological need for future, because I seek to complete myself in future, so that the same mindset can operate in that realm also. So it's good to know that, because once you know it, and you know that the sense of insufficiency or lack is intrinsically linked with that mindset, you can't get out of it no matter what you do, no matter how much you add. It's never enough. Even spiritual knowledge, if it's only an adding of experiences or knowledge, it's never quite enough yet. But the search goes on, the great need for more of me, until you see how it operates in yourself, until you see that there's a continuous movement away from what is now, until you see the need for this mind-made sense of self. And this is really lies at the root of that continuous conflict in the world, collectively and personally, the madness of human history. Why is that? Why is human history so insane? 80% of it. Look at the 20th century. Incredible. How can humans do this? There must be an enormous dysfunction at the core of the human mind, and this is it. Because a great need of this mind-made sense of self is actually in order to continue to feel its sense of self, it needs to create opposition with others, situations and people, because only by fighting against, by having issues with, can it continue to feel its mentally derived sense of self. You need the sense of separation, of me against you. There's a need for conflict and problems built into the mind-made sense of self. It never says that openly. It says, I'm looking for peace, joy and happiness. But then what it says and does is the opposite in many cases. So you can see the need for conflict in personal relationships, in organizations, nations, between nations and nations, religions, and even within religions. Any human structure, sooner or later, they will be in conflict. There's these relationships every few days, most relationships. You seem to be forced to act out that kind of conditioned script where you are in conflict with each other. And problems. The little self says, the egoic self says, I want to be free of problems. But problems are part of its sense of identity. It's looking for the next one. And we all know people who, you say, who would they be without their problems? It's easier to see it in others. All that is the structure of the self that needs its enemies to continue to feel. It's a very favorite way of enhancing your sense of self through enemies, is to argue and feel the enormous momentum behind being right in an argument. Making the other person wrong. If you can make the other person wrong, you can strengthen your sense of self. Of course, you don't know that you have really only strengthened the illusion, but for a moment, it feels good. Not really, but the ego says it feels good. The body knows that it doesn't feel good at all. But the ego says, I've tried, I've shown him that I'm right. And for the moment, you have added that big rightness to the sense of self, and it grows. And then after a little while it wears off. And then you need somebody else to make wrong. And you might even be looking. It's, of course, unconscious. And then you start discussing a spiritual matter, and you say, you don't know what you're talking about. So let me tell you. Or you say something, and somebody doubts your point of view. Now, your point of view is a mental position, a thought. This is how it is. And somebody else says, that's not how it is at all. But you have a mental sense of self. You have identified with the thought. Identified means your sense of self is in that thought. It's a me. Yourself is in the thought. One could say, I sometimes use the expression, you have reincarnated into the thought form for a moment. Reincarnated means yourself is in it. It's one with your sense of self. So when somebody says, no, you're completely wrong, it is an attack on your very life. This is illusion. Because your identity is in the thought. And so there's an enormous amount of emotional, the defensiveness that comes, or the aggression that comes when you defend your mental position. In very unconscious people, it can easily degenerate into violence. And then violence, in many cases, that is the root of violence. Making the other wrong. Even a nation, collectively the same mindset operates, making the other nation wrong. Okay, let's prove that they are wrong. We'll attack them. And then we are right. And the more enemies we have, the more we feel our sense of self. So it operates, whether on a personal or collective level, that delusion that through fighting and opposition you can strengthen the self, the me. And so it's always looking out it's not really, the egoic self isn't really looking for peace. It says that. It cannot show you openly that it's looking for trouble. If it weren't, human history would not be the way it is. The world situation would not be the way it is. The madness of it, and I always say, if you doubt it, read 20th century or any other century, but the 20th century is the most mad. Or watch TV tonight. If you doubt the madness, what is this? And so it is built in this need for enemies, for problems and conflict. Everybody carries that in here and is forced to act it out to strengthen the illusion of me. And it always works for a little while. So all these things operate, the adding and the needing opposition, needing an enemy works. Those two work very strongly. So you're always looking for the next thing. And so what is humankind to do? If humankind is trapped in this collective conditioning of the mind, are we ever going to find the sanity? Are we ever going to find who we are beyond that delusion? And there's nothing wrong with a form identity, but if your sense of self is completely in it, it becomes dysfunctional. Form identity is an aspect of who you are, the form aspect. Function, social function, all those things I mentioned. Beautiful. But if your self is in it, if that you derive your sense of self from that and have nothing deeper than that, it's always a cause of problems and suffering. It's beautiful being a mother, but if you only know yourself as that role, you will be clinging, and you will be clinging to that form. If you don't know yourself beyond form, there's always a dysfunction that comes in. So how do you know yourself beyond form? This is the question that's been asked forever since the spiritual search started, because it is a spiritual question. It is the ultimate spiritual question. Who am I? Am I more than this? And of course, you could add answers on the mind level by adding beliefs. They're a little bit comforting. How do I know that I am more? How do I know that? How do I step out of this continuous stream of thinking? A lot of it is to do with self. That's why it never stops. It's so compulsive, because I need to keep myself going. It's almost constant, but it's always overlooked. And that is the mind-made egoic self. What its main enemy, it has many, it needs them, but its main enemy that it continuously fights and ignores, opposes, resists, is actually the present moment, the now. It doesn't want this. It never wants the now. There's always an unease with the now. There's always more, sometimes more than unease, because I'm on my way to the future that is going to fulfill me. The now is a stepping stone. It enables me to get to the mental projection of future where I'm going to complete myself. So please don't hold me up now. I have no time for now. I have something much more important on my mind, and that is myself as this future projection where I'm going to make it. That could also be a spiritual thing. It could be a spiritual mental image of a future state to be achieved as a strong mental projection, and you're just trying to get away from this because you need to get there. Full liberation, attainment, realization can have an enormous pull towards future. And you don't realize you are trapped in the same mindset that the BMW person is trapped in. it's become a pull towards future and trying to make it. And so I've met many spiritual seekers who've become unhappy after 30 years of search, 40 years of search, 50 years of search. When am I going to arrive? Really, have you ever looked at now? Have you ever looked at the only thing that never leaves you, the only thing that is ever real, the only thing where anything can ever happen, be, said, thought, experienced? It's got to be now. Life is always this moment. But the mind-made egoic self is striving towards the next one for its completion. It's looking for itself there. It doesn't know that it is already here. If you could only acknowledge fully and deeply this here and this now, if you could go deeply into this now, you would find that yourself, beyond a mental story, is already totally complete. And only on the level of form could you add things, and that's beautiful. Never to find yourself. You can learn new things, it's beautiful. Explore new countries, beautiful. More of this, even have more possessions. But you can't find yourself through that. If you try to look for yourself through more, even spiritual experiences, they are nice too. But if you're looking for yourself, that never works. So adding more is beautiful, except you can't find yourself through more. More works on the phenomenal level. And when you realize that, you give up. You recognize, first of all, the egoic need to make the now into an enemy and to run away from it. To make it into a means to an end, to resist it internally, to criticize it, to project yourself away from it. I'm not interested in this because this is a limitation on who I am, who I want to be. I'm on my way to the future. Everybody in the big cities of the world, they are all almost out of breath. And if you stopped any one of them, they would give you a reason why they are out of breath, because I need to get there. But the common denominator is they are all trying to get to the future. And the whole life is spent like that. And the spiritual aspirant, metaphorically speaking, maybe he's not running around, but there could be this same inner urge for future inside, so the breathlessness would become a metaphor. When am I going to be myself? Have you looked deeply into now? The only thing that never leaves you, all there ever is, your entire life, here, in this space of now. Don't talk to me about now. I don't want this. This is a limitation. I don't want the place where I live. You mean this is not what I want. I don't want to have the place where I live, the place where I work. All these are limitations of my life. I want to limitless. I want to find myself as that which is beyond limitation. That's why I'm trying to get away from the now. But has it worked? How many years have we been trying to get away from it? Well, 55, 60. And have you gotten away from the limitations of now? Not yet, but I have some more time left. And you see the fallacy of that, and then you suddenly pay a little bit more attention to now. First you see the pull away from it, and you notice that. And then your attention moves into just this. Now, just this often is not... Sometimes it's beautiful, but more often than not, okay, it's not that interesting. I mean, why should I linger here? And at other times, it's not only not interesting, it's actually, this is not where I want to be. This not this now, because this now is a limitation on my life. I'm trying to get out of this. Okay, but you can't. So you look more deeply, and then something opens up within you. You pay attention to this moment. And then comes the realization, all you ever have is now. The one thing that is permanent in your life. Now, to the mind, it hardly makes sense to say that. What does that mean, it's always now? The mind says, no, it's not always now. There's so many different moments in my life. They're all different. It's not the case. The form that this now takes changes continuously. Forms appear in this field of now. And because people know only the form that appears in the now, they believe that there are many different nows every day and every hour, one moment after another moment and another. But of course, it is always the one eternal, timeless, one moment. Only the form in which it appears changes continuously. Now, the very form in which it appears, this is the reason why many people don't want the now, because it's not satisfying enough. It doesn't add enough to me. It might even threaten my sense of self, the form that this moment takes. And in any case, it's not fulfilling enough. It might even be a limitation on me. I want expansion, and here I am in this little prison cell in certain extreme cases, where the now is seen as very, very limiting. Or your body, your physical body, may be ill, can't move very well anymore, so that becomes the now, the form that this now takes can, in some cases, be extremely limiting. And you are asking me, a person might say, to not to try and get away from it? Yes, because that didn't work. Why not try something else? Why not try to live in alignment, inner alignment with the form that this now takes? In other words, to embrace the now internally, no matter in what form it comes. To say yes to now, which after all is life. It is inseparable from now. Life is always now, never not now. And so you say yes to life by saying yes to this moment, and whatever form this moment takes, you say, how can I argue with it? It already is. It is. It is the isness of this moment. Of course I can change it. I can take action now. If I'm I'm locked in a building, I've lost the key, this is the now. Of course, then I can get up and shout out of the window and say, can somebody please open the door? But if nobody hears, maybe somebody will come. But at this moment, this is this now. Now you can internally argue with it and resist it, or you can say, that is the isness of this moment. That is the suchness of now, the form it takes. And you see the futility and even madness of arguing with is. Because whatever is already the case. So the shift in consciousness happens the moment you say yes to what is. Because the entire structure of the egoic, mind-made self lives on resistance and opposition and on making the now into an enemy. It lives through that. That keeps it going. So the beauty of it is we can step out of thousands of years of collective conditioning, not through needing more time to step out of it. And this message cannot yet be heard by everybody. There are still many people on the planet, before they are ready to listen to this, they need more time. But since you are sitting here, I assume that something in you hears the message that to find yourself, and we will look more deeply now, see what does it mean now? To find yourself, you don't need future. For everything else, it's helpful on the practical realm. It works quite well. Now, when you say yes to whatever form this moment takes, what happens? Here comes the form of that this now takes. Say, all right, I welcome this because it is. The form that this now takes, usually something in you, which is the egoic structures, would have resisted it as limiting, not enough, it's not what completes me. And through resisting this form in a situation, an event, a person, a human being, it can only appear in the field of now. Through resisting it, any form that appears, you strengthen your own form identity. There's a contraction in your form identity when you resist a form that appears in the now. And that contraction is the strengthening of the illusory self. And so it likes that. It has a strong momentum because it survives in and through that resistance. When you relinquish the resistance because you've seen through the futility and madness of living in that way, and you embrace the now, there's the form that the now takes, and you bring a yes to that. And suddenly, what I say now is only a little metaphor or pointer. There is a sense of space around what is happening in the now. There's a larger spaciousness, inner, perhaps even outer, a space around the form of now, which could be a human being, a situation, something has gone wrong, which happens a lot. The mind would call it wrong because it's against what should be happening. This shouldn't be happening now. But here it is. Yeah, but it shouldn't. But here it is. Okay. Oh, okay. You become aligned with that isness, and that is suddenly, oh. There's a spaciousness around the form of now. It happens within a field of, yes, peace around it. You can't, it is not something that you can easily capture in words or thoughts because it is formless. through that act of what ultimately we could call surrender, entering the surrendered state of consciousness, surrender to God. That's a little bit abstract. Who knows what God wants? How do I surrender to God? Surrender to whatever form this now takes, because the totality has brought this about. It is intrinsically linked with the totality of the cosmos. Everything is totally interconnected. So the form that this now takes could not be otherwise. The whole universe has brought this about as form. And there's a little me in the head that has an argument with it. And strengthens itself through that argument. That is suffering. That is the cause of human suffering. That is not knowing yourself beyond this little form. So suddenly there is a depth of spaciousness that is there when you surrender to what is completely. An uncompromising yes. That is surrender to God. And in that, the egoic structures that live on resistance and on denial of now subside. And there's a depth to your being suddenly, and a peace that is there no matter what form this now takes. Because quite often, as we pointed out, it is a limitation. It appears as a limitation on your life. Not don't want that, but it's here. So the limitation, now people sometimes spend a whole lifetime running away externally and internally from limitations. And I'm not saying don't change a situation if change is possible. But if you would find, whatever situation you get into, you encounter new limitations, and you are going to find that. Yes, you can improve your life situation, but even if you improve it, some other limitations will appear. I gave the example in the talk yesterday, an unemployed actress working as a waitress, being in resistance to that, or being in surrender to that seeming limitation. Through being in the surrendered state, in my little story that I gave to explain that, in the surrendered state, she honored the now. Each customer in the restaurant, instead of saying, here I am, I'm a brilliant actress, and what has life given me? A waitressing job. And then the now you can't honor, because the now is so limiting and unpleasant, you would be fighting it internally, continuously, and every customer you would make him or her feel that you don't like this now, and you are part of it. And then, if she enters the state of, all right, this, not a mental concept, I might as well accept that I'm a waitress, that is a further conceptualized sense of self, strengthening that. Of course you're not a waitress, it's a temporary function. You're nothing permanently, it's all a temporary function. So don't derive an identity, an unpleasant, not enough identity from saying, I'm a waitress, this is what life has given me. Simply accept, not that you are a waitress, it's a delusion, accept this moment. And there you are, there's the customer. And you say, can I help you? You're honoring and saying yes to now. With that comes in a totally different energy into the interaction. And the customer senses that he or she is being honored. You honor the now and any form that comes into the now that goes with it, without saying. If you honor the now, whatever form this takes is honored. And so And I gave a little humorous example that after serving many people in that way, she meets a director who gives her a card and call me up, my name is Steven Spielberg. And the shift came in. 3 years later she's a famous actress, world famous, and is her life now free of limitation? No. She can't walk alone in the street anymore. Everybody wants something. Totally restricted her freedom of movement. What does she do there? To see that before long, some form of limitation will recur in your life, in the now. And you surrender to that. You can change the situation, but knowing the limitless is not to be encountered in the world of form, because form means limitation. So, you say yes to the now, even if it is a form of limitation, seemingly. You surrender to that. Yes. And suddenly, around the seeming limitation, there is spaciousness. A certain depth. What really is arising here, although we need to be careful with words, all forms, thought forms, physical forms are conditioned. It's the conditioning. Conditioned consciousness, consciousness appearing as a form. Consciousness appearing as a thought form. Consciousness appearing in many, many forms. But there is, the appearance arises out of a vast realm of the unconditioned consciousness before it takes form. And that is within every human being. That dimension is there, one could say, underneath the conditioned, which is all thought forms and emotional forms. There's the depths of the unconditioned, which can be felt, cannot be known as such as you know an object in consciousness. People look for God or themselves, believing that at some point, in the future of course, they are going to find God or themselves as an object in consciousness, as a knowledge in a subject-object relationship, as if they could know it in the way that you can know a tree, but you can't, because the unconditioned is not an object. It is the ground out of which all mind objects in consciousness arise, into which they subside. So you can never know yourself in the normal sense of the word, but you can be that. And that is felt, one could say, it is a realm of stillness underneath the mental noise. And every word will reduce it. It is far more than that. Every word is no more than a little pointer. A realm of aware presence that is beyond thought. Thought can happen, come out of it, but in itself, it is consciousness, one could say, without thought, unconditioned. Oh, that is the deepest meaning of now. Because the strange thing about now is that it never leaves you and it doesn't change, the field of now. Because it is, the essence of now is It is the unconditioned consciousness, the field in which all phenomena happen. And now the beauty here is to know that, one could say, you know the now beyond the form it takes. But you don't know it in a subject-object relationship. You know this field of now. When you surrender to the form, you know that which is beyond form. That's surrender to the form, the limitation, and then there is that emerges that is beyond form and beyond limitation as yourself. And this goes against how everybody lives in this world. They do not surrender to the limitation of this form. They think they want to get away from it. Surrender to the form of now takes you into the depths of the now itself, which you then know as the essence of your being. But don't know anything about it. A direct unitive knowing as yourself. I would go so far as to say that you are the now. Totally one with it. It never leaves you. You can't leave yourself. The essence, the unconditioned dimension of who you are. And when you know that, you can allow the conditioned and the form to be, and it's beautiful. The form as which you appear, because you don't need it anymore to derive a sense of self from it. Then the forms are beautiful also. You honor them really for the first time when you know yourself to be beyond the form. You honor all the forms completely also. So, to surrender to the limitation, the seeming limitation, this is the essential truth. The ultimate truth of all religions is the surrendered state of consciousness. There's even one religion that's called surrender, Islam. But it is the essence of all religion. In Christianity, that essence is contained in the image of the cross. Jesus on the cross is all of humanity. The cross is the ultimate symbol of extreme limitation. Couldn't be more limited than to be nailed to a cross. It's a torture instrument. So in a way, for a while, humans experience the world, which is the world of form, almost as a torture. It's so heavy. And then that can take a time until suddenly they can hear the message of surrender. And then at that moment, as symbolized by that image of Jesus, surrender happens on the cross, total surrender to extreme limitation and the seemingly unacceptable. Not my will, but thy will be done. Thy will is the will of the one. And then my and thy merge in the act of surrender. There's no longer my that opposes thy. When my and thy merge, there is total surrender. Your will is one with the totality. And at that moment, the cross becomes a symbol for the divine. The very limitation turns into the symbol for God or the divine. So it's not by resisting or running away from, but by that deep act of surrender that the divine is realized. And that amazingly, does not take time. Surrender can only be now. It may take time to dwell in the surrendered state as your permanent state. You fall back into resistance because the momentum of the collective conditioning is so strong. And then you re-enter surrender. But the moment of surrender is always now because you surrender to the now and in the now. So it can only be now. So that one decisive act or spiritual practice is the one that doesn't take time. And that's the beauty of it. It really means you don't need future to find yourself, and you need to add nothing to you to find yourself. Nothing. Then you can play with the realm of phenomena and add things. It's beautiful. It's a play. But you no longer need it for yourself. That's the essence of spiritual realization. All the teachings point to it. That is to see that, what grace to see that the very thing that looked so heavy, which is the world of form, the very thing that seemed to be limiting me on all sides, that very thing is the doorway into the formless and into who I am beyond form. And you see that ultimately they are one. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. They are one. And that is the message of eternal salvation, the most sublime message for humankind. Nothing else is needed but that. Thank you.
Dravyam